Welcome to Doctor on Call with your host, DocGriffon. The Doctor will be with you momentarily. Our guest this evening is YouTuber and modern-day blacksmith, Stalvind Forge. Doctor on Call may cause fits of laughter and may increase the effects of alcohol. If affected, do not drive a motor vehicle or operate heavy machinery. DocGriffon, paging DocGriffon. You're needed in the OR, stat.
And thank you very much, Nurse Viper Stored. And of course, tonight, hey, we're back. We're on season 2. We're starting off with a guest that interests me incredibly. I received the symptomatic diagnosis, and what I found was perhaps maybe a slight case of anachronistic behavior. But we're going to dive into that more, and hopefully to be able to enjoy yourselves. Please sit back and relax as we have a conversation with YouTube content creator Stalvind Forge. And a very good, should I say, yes, evening. A very good evening to you, Stalvind. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Doctor. How are you today?
I literally have no complaints. And I do want to do one thing here, because they don't really need to see my pretty face bobbing up and down. So I want to get you first and foremost full front. Now, the thing I find that's really interesting is in the time that you've been on the YouTubes, you've actually garnered a lot of fans. A lot of people who like what you do and appreciate what you are doing. And it's, wow, I mean, you are new to the scene. I think we'll get into that a little bit later, but I did want to do this at the top of the hour because those of you who are watching, if you're not yet subscribed to Stalvind Forge, then please do jump down into the descriptors and go ahead. His link is down there. Click the YouTube, like it, subscribe it, get that bell ringing, and also you can follow him on Twitter. And the link is down there as well. And I would really like, I'd really like to start out with the foundational things. Where did you grow up? Was it urban, suburban, rural?
It was started on Parsons. We lived in the town for maybe 4 years before moving out rural. And then it was just woodland from there for about 18 years.
Now, when you say woodland, are you speaking more of, well, because when I think of rural, I think of you almost have to drive or ride a bicycle to get to your mailbox.
No, we lived by the road, but in the woods, we were surrounded by woodland. It was pretty thick, but we did have a main road that connected all the dotting families. We were about a quarter mile, half mile apart for most of the time.
And how far away from city center?
Maybe 25-minute drive.
Okay, gotcha. So there was quite a bit of, that because, even the ghetto that I live in, there's a bodega to walk to within 3 blocks either way.
Yeah.
Now, did you have other siblings?
I have a half sister.
Okay.
And some stepsisters now.
So,
but other than that, no.
So when you're growing up, did your mom or your dad take an interest in wilderness skills?
My dad was a Marine, so he was a heavy survivalist. You know, how the people that grew up during the Cold War era kind of became sort of pseudo-survivalists, like
Sure.
apocalyptic bug-out people. So some of that transferred a little bit for him to me. But otherwise, my mom was content reading romance novels and eating ice.
So, yeah, you would say essentially your gateway um, into the skills that you're developing now was through your father.
Yes. After his Marine Corps stint, he went Army and then finally National Guard towards where I could start remembering a lot of stuff he did. And he was a welder.
Okay.
And so he started making stuff to take home and fiddle with, just something to break the tedium of working, obviously.
Sure.
And it kind of inspired me a little bit. But books and slight guilty pleasure was The Sword and the Stone. Because I was reading some books that signified that the Sword and the Stone was actually talking about forging Excalibur. Instead of just drawing it from a rock, it was literally the ore pulled out and then made into the sword. So Sword and Stone, whenever you look at the old VHS, he pulls it not out of a rock, but an anvil. And that made me go, wow, with excitement, because those two things clicked. And I just started kind of having a passive fascination about it. But I've always... Go ahead.
No, oh, I was just going to say, so well, as you're growing up, and I know we used to do this as a second and a third grade exercise where the teacher would say, okay, go ahead and draw your occupation. You know, what do you want to be when you grow up? So around second or third grade, did you have any idea? What would you have put on the paper?
I put military, honestly. 100%. And my second choice was to be because I couldn't pick just one for the second choice, was I wanted to be an astronaut, fireman, policeman, doctor, so I could take care of space fires and space crime and treat sick people in space. You could tell that I might have had a small interest in space.
Oh, there you go. Now, I think it bears repeating because I've asked this question to everybody that I've had on that has had service experience. What was the draw to the military?
Kind of just saw it in my family, primarily through my father. My uncle was in. I was always told stories about my great uncle who was in World War II. And that kind of just drew me in, and I felt like a bond or a kinship, kind of like almost a intuitive draw to it. I just knew that I would end up there.
Almost the genetic disposition.
Yes.
Yeah, I've talked to several people, and a lot of their answers are similar. It's just something that I thought I should do, that was right, and helped to move forward. And I know there's still a lot of people playing with this whole fascistic thing, but you know, military is duty. Military's honor, in my book personally, because you're basically saying that, hey, guess what? I'm willing to die for you. I'm willing to protect you so you can enjoy the rights that you have currently. Sorry, I just went off there, but
no, I completely understand. I agree with that. I was raised on classical Southern upbringing, so there was always bits and parts about being polite, honor codes, duty, and what's expected of you. And that was one of those things that I felt was expected at the same time I wanted to do, because I do want to live an honorable life. I do want to fulfill my duties. I want to present that a man's word is worth his weight in gold. I mean, that in this day and age, that's sorely lacking.
I can't disagree with you on that. You know, it's the old deeds, not words.
Yes.
I'm tired of people talking a good game, and it's nice to run into people like yourself, because I will say I kind of stumbled into meeting you through Kadant, and Kadant was saying, well, you know, he does this, and I'm like, all right, cool, let's go check it out. And I was like, damn it, there's only like 4 videos up. I want to see more. And you're taking care of that, but we'll get down the line on that. I'm just bouncing ahead of myself here. So, what kind of student were you going through? You know, junior high school, high school.
Kind of fell into gaming early because that was kind of like the boom in the 90s was personal consoles that were more advanced beyond the more simple things. And I say that knowing that there was other consoles before it. But kind of like a gamer, as soon as I hit gaming, I kind of started becoming a slacker. I was more interested in the interesting puzzles that somebody would make on a game and stuff versus schoolwork or where does my commas go. I mean, don't get me wrong. I was probably a poor student in my mind, but I was an excellent test taker. So I would know the things I didn't know, but I was poor at doing in school what they expected.
Oh yeah, I was a lazy sod because I was test smart. Yeah,
Which is funny.
well, and I think that's completely okay. I mean, now you were getting to the end of high school. Were you thinking automatically, once I graduate, I'm going military, or did you have any thoughts about going to college?
Well, high school, towards the end of it anyway, I found my high school sweetheart, and I was very much in love, and it put me in a very difficult position because, not for any untoward reason, but she did not like the military at all. But I was, like I said, I was head over heels for this girl. And in my heart of hearts, I knew it wouldn't last if I was a factory worker waiting for her. She wanted to marry after graduation, 100%. And I would have done it in a heartbeat. But my call to duty, my need to serve, trumped my first love. And it pained me greatly, but that's part of the sacrifice that we were taught. I sacrificed my happiness at that time and possible future happiness to be a servant of the people. And it was a little comfort for an 18-year-old man who just lost out, but it was a comfort.
Well,
college didn't interest me, honestly.
Well, and I don't know anybody who's had a road to their future easily paved.
That's true.
Now, so you graduate. The ink on the diploma is fresh. Did you measure your options as to which branch that you wanted to go into?
Yes, to a degree. My father, being a jarhead prior to being a soldier, told me, and I'll never forget it. I was like, Dad, I want to be a Marine. He looked at me and goes, son, I got to tell you a horrible truth. I'm like, oh God, my dad's just going to make some mean comment and make me sad. But as he was wont to do. But he goes, you have your mother's temper and my sadistic nature. And he pulled me real close, goes, I almost killed a fellow recruit because he made me so mad. And that's when went in during peacetime, so the bar was kind of high for standards of who they brought in.
Yeah.
He goes, we're at war now, so the bar is on the floor. I fear that you may kill one of the fellow recruits.
Wow.
And I was like, fair enough. Yes. And I was like, I'm okay. I don't know how to take this. Thanks, I guess. But he's like, how about this? If you're dead set on it, try the Army first. I was like, all right. So that's when I started all the recruitment stuff.
So what did you go in as? What was your MOS?
I was a 19 kilo or an M1 Abrams armor crewman. Okay. I got stuck in by the video. You know the type.
Oh, yeah.
This is a cool video, and you're just like, yeah, that's what I want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, my brother was 82nd Airborne, but most of the time he was running taxi service.
Outstanding.
So, how many years did you put in with the armed forces?
I put in total, if I count everything else, like all of it together, for a total about 8 years. I say about because I know they don't discharge you exactly on the dot.
Or if time of crisis, they'll just extend you for a while.
Of course. I swore in, or my first swearing in, because I went through a contract that was slight split option. It was March 18th, 2008, and then I swore in to the Big Army September the 3rd, 2008. So from March and I finally got out in October the 27th, 2014.
Did you spend most of the time with your feet on North America, or did you get any travel in?
I was stuck at that black hole they call Fort Campbell for the most of it. I deployed with them twice, and then they're like, "No, you're too good at your job now. We need you here forever." I was like, "No, please, God."
Oh,
That's what happens when you become a jaded soldier and you hate everyone, so you just do your job so they'll leave you alone.
now, were there any skills that you learned in service that became translatable in your current day?
Yes, several things that you can push on through stuff. Like it's not so much a skill, so much as it's a trait they instill in you. That grit, like you just bear through some horrible stuff. Like you're tired and you push on, you dig deep. But discipline, the skill set of discipline was definitely transferable. It's helped me in a lot. Military bearing was also one that I've taken with me. There's times where I get really upset and very disagreeable, but I bite my tongue and say, yes, sir, no, sir, nod my head, just take my butt chewing and go on.
Yeah, I can certainly understand that. I think that's also one of the societal things that we're missing is considerate patience. Being able to essentially let somebody or spurg, and then you're able to go on about your own way and not play with yourself as far as being butthurt.
That's true. Sorry, I had some polypro on. I had to take it off.
No problem. So you get your 8 years in. Now, at any time during this, did the bug bite you for blacksmithing?
It had been nagging at me for many years until I got to the last 4 years of my enlistment. And then it started hitting me really hard. Like I had started plotting out where in the barracks yard I was going to put my forge, how I could explain away all the problems that would entail, and all sorts of other small little, like, nah, don't worry about it. It's just a hobby. I started really investing some time into looking for tools and all that fun stuff.
Well, would you say that the quest was trying to find archaic tools or trying to find modern day equivalents to those tools?
Well, the beautiful thing about smithing is that some of our tools have evolved, but more or less they've just simply evolved from the most primeval versions of themselves. A stump turned into a metal anvil, a 2 or 3 dudes hitting the same piece of steel for you turned into a power hammer powered by water and eventually pneumatics. And it was not so much the difficulty of finding equivalencies, is that finding people who are willing to sell them if you could find them cheap versus from a retailer.
Well, I know that I know that you had an issue with as far as chasing down an anvil. Do you want to go into that one?
Oh yeah, why not? Chasing down anvils has been a pain in my ass since Forge and Fire really kicked off. I didn't think it'd be such a pain to see a bunch of new smiths who want to get into the art until I started competing with them in the shopping arena. Also, the damn collectors who would just eBay snipe you by pennies. It was just murder on the mind. Because I could pay $800, $900 for a brand new one of the right weight, so that way I could do more on it. Versus, because the thing is, the smaller your anvil, the less weights on it, the less you really want to put on it, as in terms of force, pressure, how heavy the hammer blow or hammers that you can use to pound on it with on your whatever you're working on. So you want a sizable anvil. I mean, almost any anvil will work, but I'd rather have exactly what I need or better.
Well, what was the one that you, if I remember the story correctly, you ran into a guy who had many anvils, but And you're like, great, one of those would suit me perfectly. And he's like, no, I'm a collector.
Exactly. He had, what, a barn full, and they were just everywhere. Different years, different shapes, kinds, makes, conditions. And I desperately wanted just one. He's like, no, this is just showpieces.
But you're not showing them anywhere. It's in a damn barn.
Exactly. And what kills me beyond not being able to have one or buy one was that there's so much art or tools or something to create on those. They still have so much life left to produce, and they're just being neglected. Oh, I mean, I can't say they're neglected. He might have been taking actual care of them, like treating them and coating them with oil every so often and so on. But they're more or less.
Well, I kind of put it to just like the people who will, and there's tons of them out there on YouTube right now. The ones that spend a shit ton of time collecting these Funko Pops, and all they're doing is building a wall back behind them so their camera can see it and they can flaunt it. They're not playing with any of this. And it's like you're defeating the purpose. Just like if you've got 20 anvils, then more than likely you've got at least 17 or 18 more anvils than you actually need. And I mean, they were created, unlike Funko Pops, they were created for form and functionality to actually do something, to actually produce an item. And I could see where a ton of frustration would come in with that. Now, I do, watching your videos, I do see that you had an anvil. How did that search end?
The new anvil?
Mm-hmm.
Because we have the old one and we have a new one.
I just saw the one that you were hammering on last episode.
Ah, that's the new one. I just kind of got lucky. I saw it on pop up on one of my blacksmith groups. I was like, it's being sold and it's cheap. Let me put a deposit on this. And they're like, all right, that works. I'll pay you in installments. He's like, okay. So I started paying on that.
Well, yeah, and anvils are not cheap, even though they may seem outdated and unusable. That did not drop the price or the value in those who are searching for them.
That is true. Once something goes kind of out of style for specific groups, there's always going to be someone who collects them and will buy them at a premium. And that's precisely what most people do. Some of these guys who buy these up actually will turn around and sell them at a higher mark later once they watch the stock go down on all these other places. They'll just start jacking up their prices like, I got a lot of anvils if you can pay.
Yeah, just like house flipping.
Yep.
Now, when did you start your very first blacksmithing project?
I started it shortly after I moved back down to my hometown. Well, back to my old home. And my first anvil for me was a block of, I don't even know what kind of steel that was. It was just given to me to use for a while, strapped to the tongue of where I was living, the trailer I was living in. And I just started pounding out a knife. I had no plan, nothing. Just heated up in a fire made of wood and just kept going. I used a leaf blower to stoke my fire.
No, there you go. Well, modern methods are not necessarily a bad thing because, you don't have anybody stomping up and down on a bellows to help you out.
That's exactly right. I have no apprentices or hopefuls to be apprentices. I'm just a novice myself.
Now, when you were pounding steel, was it just basically trying to figure out how it worked, or did you have something that you wanted to make?
I knew I wanted to make a knife. So I kind of kept that in mind, and I just kept going until it started taking the shape I wanted. I spent probably close to 24 hours working it because I just refused to let it win. I was like, this lump of dead metal is not going to stop me from shaping it the way I wanted.
And what type of metal were you using at the time? Was it repurposed?
It was repurposed. It was a a large bolt, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was a large bolt. I actually enjoyed pounding that flat because it kept the thread kept together, so it had this nice little like line pattern through it. Almost like a faux Damascus look.
Now, I don't know at this time. I mean, internet was up and running for you. Was there anybody that you sought out for help or advice, or was this just basically the school of learning?
That was just the school of hard knocks. I hadn't really put much interest into like researching until I had put hands on and failed a few times.
Now, what would you say was the first success?
My first knife was my first success. Like I plodded through building a forge, like trying to set it up properly, like getting everything together. And after the first knife was several failures. Stuff that wouldn't hold right, stuff that would snap and break, experimenting with temperature. There's a lot of failed projects in the pond that used to be by my house.
And do you still have it?
Oh, my failures?
No, your first knife.
No, I gave that as a gift to a friend of mine who I share a forge with. I don't know why I just pointed it off into the distance, like you guys can see it. But at the gentleman that was on one of my streams, he's more or less my business partner out of the shop, and I gave it to him as a gift. I was like, here. And then he introduced me to another smith to do some classes, and we started working together in her shop. And she didn't tell me to put up my hammer and apron and go fly fishing, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So I stuck with it more.
By the way, I would like to respond. We had a $10 donation on Streamlabs. Thank you, Merc. There was no message, but I think he's probably enjoying the content.
Outstanding.
And now you said, now this intrigues me. You said she.
Yes.
Typically, you don't expect the feminine wiles to come into forging heavy metal and sweating and grunting over an anvil.
It doesn't stoke that to your mind, no, of course, but there's several female smiths out there. It's not as prevalent. I mean, as diverse as any workforce, they have their own interests. I've known a lot of sculptors use anvils and similar tools of me to do their art. So, I mean, there's different people, different strokes for different folks.
Oh, sure. And did you find that I don't know any better way to say this, but did you find cohorts in crime that weren't those collectors out there, that weren't people like, oh, this is sacred knowledge and it shall not be shared? Did you find a ring of complicitors to fall in with?
Sort of, not really. Most of the old guard are loosening the straps. Half of what they know or they did know has been kind of scienced out to be either partially true or not true at all anymore. So some of the stuff that they learned was outdated information based on half science. But,
so would you say that sometimes metallurgy to the experienced people seem more like a poison pill?
Yes and no. I mean, there's people who go through Victor brought up a point there with British steel. Every culture has a different method of making their steel. They have different ways that they prepare it, they finish it with. I mean, like, it's hard to really explain in proper words that I want, but more or less everybody's got a different way that they do it. So to them, that's sacred knowledge. Like, there's swords in Japan that won't give up that knowledge so easily.
Oh, sure. I mean, you look around all around the world, the way that somebody made a Civil War saber is completely different to how somebody made a daisho in China and Japan. There's definitive ways of forging, but you found people who were willing to open up
Oh,
because I would say it's more of a I would say it's more of a craft. It's not just a job where you go in and you do a 9 to 5 on it. It's something where you have to find some type of affinity. Is that a proper word?
yeah. I've known people who find more affinity with doing different cultural types of weapons. I know a guy who prefers making katanas or attempting to make katanas. I've seen people who enjoy making kopeshes, and I don't know the actual name for their swords, but historical African swords.
I don't know. I haven't watched Deadliest Warrior in a while.
Yeah, let's not speak.
By the way, Alex, we will do the Q&A starting at the top of the hour, but I'm making sure to keep track of any of the questions that are asked right now. But if you do have a question and I miss it and you want to refresh me, coming at the 9 o'clock hour, we're going to go ahead and open up and do some questions directly for Stalvind. Now, when you get set up, I can see being a blacksmith being more of a solitary endeavor unless you have someone over your shoulder. Basically, you're apprenticing with them. What was the case with you? When did you feel confident, or I should even say, do you feel confident currently with how you're doing things?
Well, of most people that ask me, do I think I'd make good knives? I will always say no. I do not make good knives. I will never let myself be comfortable with the idea that I've made good knives. I won't rest until I make masterful knives. And I'm not there yet. But I'm confident with my abilities growing. I wish I had more time to spend in the shop than I do, mostly because I have to work day jobs. But if I could put in the everyday hours, I think I would progress pretty nicely. I feel like I have a good track going. I've put myself with a lot of challenges ahead with making, say, Weeaboo Jones a Xiphus blade, which is a type of sword with attack. I'm dropping these names not as a plug or anything. It's just listing the people. Attack Bunny, I'm making her a Celtic axe, and it's more stylized. These different knives and different types of weapons I'm going to try to make is more of a crucible, if we're going to use puns, for me than anything else.
Do you find yourself wanting to use repurposed material over than going out and actually buying them? Is there more of a challenge?
I prefer stock material so I have control on what's inside of it, especially if I'm giving someone a functional piece. If I can estimate how much is in one particular piece of scrap, if I can melt it back down and make it usable, yes. But if I have scrap or leftovers rather, of my stock material, I will always repurpose that. I will always reuse it. As long as there's enough to work with, of course.
Well, and yeah, I think it's kind of wise because I mean we'll talk a little bit about history, but there's complete evidence as far as using repurposed stuff. It becomes dirty metal, and if you've got soldiers who are running out on campaigns and all they have are their swords and they're rusting after 2 or 3 weeks, then yeah, I can see where purity would definitely have its advantages.
Of course.
Now, as far as it goes, if you had everything set up, you had an open wallet to make something, what would you like to go into? Would you like to? I should say, which discipline of weapons making would you favor?
Well, for me, I definitely would go into swordsmithing. There's so many varieties of swords out there that I would enjoy making. I mean, it's hard to really say. Weaponsmithing is so varied. And then there's also armory. it's just too tempting, and I want to divide my time between the both of them because I kind of want to be a one-stop shop in that regard.
Wow.
But if I had to pick, I would probably stick with weapons. Probably swords.
So what era of weapons interests you the most?
Definitely the 14th century European arms.
Hmm. Okay. Now, are you talking more like actual swords, or are them going into like using rapiers?
Well, I mean, rapiers is still a sword. It's a foining weapon, but it's still a sword. It's my least favorite sword. I hate using them.
Well,
But
yeah.
I find most kinship in swords with the German sword makers between their Kriegmessers and their long sword with a standard cross.
And honestly, how important is it to, instead of just getting in the shape that it should be, as far as hammering? I don't know if you do folding either. Basically, shaping the piece of metal to where you're confident that it will be something that can be used practically.
Right now, I'm pretty confident in my knives. Swordsmithing is definitely a different beast. It's similar, but it there's a lot that can go wrong down the length of what you're working. But given a couple of years of constant practice at it, I'd be quite comfortable with handing someone a sword I make for them and be like, "This will save your life if you ever have to need it."
Yeah,
But
I've seen quite a few people. I watched a documentary recently about the last swordsmith in Japan, and he's in his, I think, 90s at this point, and he's still forging at this point, but he hasn't found anybody that he claims is worthy enough to pass on the skill. So essentially, he's going to die and take that to his grave. Now, that do you think that there have been a lot of good techniques or a lot of teaching that have gone to the grave and that should have been shared? Do people act selfish if they find out something to work iron, work metal easily? Or is it something that once somebody learns, because I don't know the culture, once somebody learns, they're ready to share it and say, hey, listen, guys, I just found this out?
well, Japan's a very ritual and ceremony based endeavors in their past, and I could see why he would feel that way. I do think it's a shame historically and in a form of cultural loss because once that technique is lost, there's no telling how long it'll take to find it again. I mean, uh, even with how most people, like for a long time, it's still debated about Damascus even. Like, are we even making Damascus steel with the pattern welds? Because it was written down a couple times and described a few times, but no one's made a clear consensus of what is Damascus.
Well,
But
I know there was a question about Damascus steel, and we'll definitely get to that. But for those who are not familiar with how Damascus steel was made and crafted, can you fill us in a bit on that?
I can describe what we call Damascus now, which is basically just pattern welds. You take a bunch of dissimilar metal or layers of different metal and just stack them together, and in some form or another, you'll fasten it together so you can heat all of it up together, and then you'll take a substance what we call flux, which you can get as borax, washing powders, and you'll just sprinkle that on there, and you'll coat it really thick. And basically, this agent is what's going to eat together this metal. So when you start hammering it together, it'll actually force itself to be welded tight instead of having like small gaps.
Mm-hmm.
And the end result is a beautiful pattern depending on if you twist it or if you shape it in a different way. There's many different ways to make these things. And they usually have a pleasant look. You'll have to acid bath them to eat away at the top layer. So that way you can see all the different colors, because each of the different similar steels will show differently.
And what do you think is and the best way I can say is, what do you think the most durable weapon that's ever been created? I mean, as far as coming from the forging aspect.
Well, it actually depends on what it's used for. Depends on what type of a weapon it would be. Like we talked briefly, mentioned the rapier being a pointing weapon or a piercing. I use D&D terms there because most nerds in chat will know.
Sure.
Basically, it doesn't lend itself to cutting. It can cut, but it doesn't lend itself to it. It's more of a thrust weapon, as opposed, say, to a longsword, which is a slashing weapon, or it could be more versatile. It doesn't lean too heavily on each way. You can look at katanas, which is good for slice and a draw cut across a body.
Well,
It really depends on what you're doing.
well, and I've seen a, I think it was a first or second century katana,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a broken katana. But the fascination is that you could look in and you could legitimately see all the layers, and they were almost microscopic.
Mm-hmm.
These guys hammered them. They were saying thousands of times that they folded them thousands of times to get the rigidity and the thickness.
A lot of the mythos around katanas comes from how we've hyped it up as Americans. The reason they fold theirs a lot more is because their steel is shit. This is not an insult to them. They know this. This is why they constantly fold it and encase their cutting edge with a harder spine. I think I said that right.
Gotcha.
Again, I'm a novice. But they reinforce what crap steel they have, so that way it's better steel. They found something that was really weak and found a way to make it stronger. And that's why there was such a dedication to it. And given their mindset of cultural, like ritualistic and ceremonial way, they would put that much effort, that much intensity into their weapons, so that way they could produce a good solid sword.
I would see where the folding would definitely make it make the tensile strength better. But as far as it goes, if you were in battle, what weapon would you want to bring onto the battlefield? What piece of steel would you like to bring on?
It depends on who I'm fighting. If I'm fighting armored opponents, I'd probably bring a warhammer. Maybe a long sword if I'm going to fight another knight or armored opponent with another long weapon, or maybe even a poleaxe.
How about a Saracen? Because that's kind of a semi-armored, semi-not.
I would probably still bring my long sword, but I'd probably also bring a warhammer because of the crow's beak on the back of them usually. So regardless, I can either bludgeon them to death or I can stab them with the back end.
Well, that would work. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and Victor Rand says in the chat, a gun. No. Not back then. I mean, I know blunderbusses existed, what, in the 14th century? I think they had, or the trebuchets.
Trebuchets? Trebuchets, I believe, were there. I'd have to look at my stuff again.
Oh, that's okay. We're just talking here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not. I put away my Google PhD for these conversations, people.
Well, I mean, I actually have one of my fencing manuals has a few pictures with them in the background.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, like, let's say we're in the 1800s. Blacksmiths were in every single town. That's because they served form and function. And now with ready-made society, if I can say it that way, there's really not a lot of people out there who have taken the old traditions and advanced them forward. I know, metallurgy has jumped in leaps and bounds, but as far as it goes, taking that and doing it appropriately on on a single schedule like like a blacksmith would do, because I would always think that a blacksmith's job is very solitary. It's one of those, here's my job, this is what I got to do.
It really depends. I believe, if I'm quoting historical documentation correctly, depending on whether or not he had a journeyman studying under him and an apprentice studying under basically both of them. The apprentice didn't really learn so much right next to the blacksmith or the journeyman smith, so much as did the chores, pump the bellows, get more coal, ensure the tools were clean, put back, stuff like that. They more or less learned the shop and everything in it before they even put hands onto folding anything or shaping anything.
Well, it's osmosis by education.
More or less. But unless he had those things, blacksmith generally would probably just be there with his family in the house next to his shop. Also, good sir, I need to ask if I can use the restroom.
Oh, yeah, please do. Matter of fact, it's almost getting to the top of the hour, so I'll run the spiel. And I will do this real quick. There we go. Okay, feel free. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. Of course, in a couple minutes, we're going to do the question and answer session. If you're looking to find out more on what Stalvind does, you can always check him out. In the descriptor, there's his YouTube channel. And while he's off camera, you might want to take that 20 seconds, hop on over. Go ahead, hit the sub button, ring that bell. Only takes 20 seconds. He also has a Twitter up. And, of course, if you're looking for what I'm doing, my stuff's down there, too. I've got my Twitter. The Streamlabs, of course, if you like what we're doing. Toss some shekels our way, if you don't mind. Our Patreon. And, of course, my TeePublic store, which I'm not going to do the Medicare gimmick on. But we do have bootleg Medicare merchandise there. Even more importantly, in the descriptor are people that I enjoy watching. The greatest thing about our, and I hate to use the word community, but it's appropriate, the people who travel in the same circles, is the fact that there are some amazing content creators out there that do a wonderful job, and they're going relatively unnoticed because nobody knows that they're out there. If you've got somebody like PewDiePie who has 72 million subs, it's going to be easier to spread the word. It's going to be easier for people to find other people, especially if somebody that high up recommends it. But these are for the people that travel around kind of in my circle, and people that I enjoy. So anywhere from Blackout by Dawn to Zach Lomby Live, there's a lot of great content out there, and I encourage everybody, after you're done, to click on some of those links. See if you find people that you like, and people that, once you find out, you can always spread the good word, because the only way great content gets out is by word of mouth. So please take the time, and the people that you like, make sure and share them. And that's what it's all about, because the dozen people that I have listed down there, some people might not like the content, some people might go head over heels, but you never know until you actually try. So take a listen, take a watch, and see what you have to say, because that is the most important thing that I can think of. And of course, we'll be getting into your questions in about 10 minutes or so. I'll try to keep up here as best I can. And yeah, I will say that I'm fascinated by people who do interesting things which may seem, well, archaic. That may be essentially sourced out. Like, this machine can do it better. And it's like, well, can it? Can it really? I mean, I've got a couple of swords, but they were made in Pakistan. And those were machine tooled swords. So they're really not that great and not that trustworthy. But if somebody spent, $100,000, 200 hours on making a blade. I won't say weapon because, of course, blades can become weapons, but the greatest usage that you can have is a multi-purpose type of blade, to where you can gut a fish or you can cut a rope. That's where the amazing part comes in to me. One of the things my grandfather taught me when I was very young is that your knife is only as good as the care that you put into it. So I spend a lot of time. I've got like 3 knives myself, and I use one practically almost every day. And I spend a lot of time on the whetstone, making sure that I'm keeping an edge to it, taking care of it. It's kind of the same as somebody who's fascinated with an antique car. Always, got the turtle wax out, always buffing, always taking care of the business on it to make it look shiny and new and pretty. Well, I mean, that's pretty much the same way that you have to deal with blades. You have to make sure and take care of that blade, because that blade can eventually take care of you if you do it right. And I'll go ahead.
Exactly.
I'll bring that window back up. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I was just gesticulating. And I got some on me, I think, but that's okay. So yeah, I mean, if you had the power to travel in time and study under blacksmiths, what would be your first destination?
Ooh. I would definitely probably stop into... Dang, that is a hard one, honestly. Probably wherever Crucible Steel first started, and then transition over to Germany, because there was a lot of guilds there, so there'd be a plentiful amount to learn from there. So once I got the basics of how to make a very fine ingot, the rest would be to learn how to do everything else.
Now, I have personally seen and held several of the ones that they made through the Ottoman dynasty.
Mm-hmm.
And beautiful blades. Amazing blades. I know that skill kind of carried on to World War II Germany. I've seen some of those blades as well. There's some beautiful craftsmanship. Do you think that when the Germans actually put their mind to stuff, that they can actually do things incredibly well?
Well, taking away from political parties, most of what that was there is that they put a fine amount of effort into the fine details. Whenever Germany has someone who's become a foremost master, almost all of their work is meticulous and very artistic in some senses, where they can embellish something with like some scroll work or some kind of etching. They will. And that makes it unique. They don't make mass-produced things generally if it's by one artisan rather. If it is, that one item is unique to its siblings that are similar. Each one will have a slightly more intensified thing. Like some of the stuff we see out of Germany, a lot of their tanks were harder to repair because they needed specific pieces versus our very easy to repair tanks.
Yeah.
Because they all had the same parts. Some tanks in Germany had very specific pieces that fit that one exactly. It's like a watchmaker making different watches. They all tell time.
Well, and anybody can argue with me on this, but I always feel that doing things, especially making things with your own hands, requires an artistic skill. Would you say that somebody can muddle through and basically treat it as a job, but if you get somebody who's a true artisan, it actually makes it something collectible, usable?
Well, I mean, anyone who Yeah, this is easy to find in any workplace. You find the person who's just there for the 9 to 5, and then you find someone who's doing the job because they're passionate about it. Their work will come out far better than the person who's just there. Sure, the other guy shows up every day at the exact same time and does exactly what he was supposed to, but he doesn't care. He doesn't try to improve what he's doing.
Now, do you think that kind of lackadaisical nature is what's destroying the ability to hand down or pass on these skills?
Say again. Sorry, you cut out a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you think that this type of lackadaisical nature allows a certain skill to become basically outdated, to vanish, to become an extinct species?
To a certain extent, yeah. Stuff that humans put their heart and soul into, machines can't fully replicate. A good example, while I was coming back from the break, I was seeing something in the chat talk about manufactured the same amount of hours. You can get precision right away, but between manufactured and hand forged, there's like a very little difference between them in the very end of it if you've done it masterfully. But
Yep.
the hand forged will always come out better by that small breadth. Not much. I'm not saying manufactured stuff is bad, but the time and intensity it puts into the handcraft versus machine one. Maybe the machine didn't perform optimally that day, so I didn't do the right maintenance on it. You might have a garbage knife, or you might have a standard knife that they always make.
Well,
But I'd rather.
and you never legitimately have a robot or an automated system that looks at what they're making with an artisan's eye.
Exactly. It's just going to do its programming.
Let me take a look here. We're getting close to the top of the hour, so if you guys want to load up some questions for me, I'm going to try to scroll back here and get some of the ones that were asked a little bit earlier. Yeah, I'll tell you what. Let's start off. I'm going to start here and hopefully go forward from there. If I miss anything, guys, please make sure and just load them up, and I will ask them as they come. Alex Martin asks, do you ever mess with Damascus patterns, such as twisting steel cable and folding and using more than one type of steel in one build?
I have been currently. I haven't tried to do too much with it. I want my first true pattern weld to be with Weeaboo's Xiphus blade. So I want to kind of go in slightly blind. I want it to be like my first foray, because I don't want it to be something so blasé. I want it something that I put a lot of energy into, a lot of passion, and something that I'm trying to make perfect the first time I seem to have a good shot and do well doing that one thing. So I want to kind of make it and make hers exactly the way I've envisioned it so far.
Well, it sounds like you want to get to that eureka point, to where it's something that you discovered.
Yeah. I
And
learned from books, I learned from seeing it, I learned from doing it, but the kicker is I have to do it all.
well, yeah, it's the same as a field goal kicker who, been envisioning in their mind, but until they put it through the uprights, then that eureka moment just doesn't happen.
Exactly.
And let's see here. Here's a good one from Gulf City Cartographer. Stalvind, what would you recommend for someone interested in starting smithing, and what would be an approximate budget for tools and etc. That may not have easy alternatives?
Okay, so the first thing would be to make a brake drum forge, which you can Google the exact parts you'll need because they have specific sizes. And it should roughly equate to about $40 to $80 to complete that. Now, for hammers, you could try to find some in part stores, look for deals, join a lot of blacksmith groups, and you could find a lot of tailgate sales where old smiths are getting out of the game, or just someone who makes hammers or is doing it. You can find some pretty cheap stuff. You can also find really great deals. So kind of like network would probably be your best bet. Because the money thing, it really depends on how lucky you are on finding certain things.
Yeah, it seems also that flea markets might be a decent place to take a look.
You gotta be careful with those though, because they will gouge you. Some of those guys know exactly what they have, and they will price the shit out of you.
Yeah, I can understand that. Let's see here. The Killing Joke asks, "Do you make trophies?"
Yes, I'm making one for Andy and Tonka. One's participation trophy, and the other one's, well, you tried.
Well, that would be fun, though.
Oh, indeed. I have them in mind, but they're at the very bottom of my list right now.
Yeah, Nurse Wicked wants to know if you make jewelry.
I have dabbled into it a little bit, but that's a whole different setup I'd need to start making again, because that's a lot of hand-intensive stuff, like knitting chainmail kind of things.
Yeah, it seems to be on the same tree, but it's definitely off a different branch.
It definitely is. Most of them, like I believe someone asked about white smithing, and there's silver smithing, there's tin smithing. There's all sorts of different sublets.
Yeah, the only thing I ever learned was a little bit of wire wrapping. And that takes little to no skill at all. Sorry, wire wrappers out there, but yeah, it doesn't. You basically learn patterns. It's kind of like doing cross stitching, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Now, okay. Victor Rand asks, "Do you have an anvil-shaped toilet?"
No, I have a regular toilet-shaped toilet.
Yeah, I don't think there were ever any anvil-shaped toilets. Let's see here. Alex Martin asked, "Have you ever made a blade with pure stock by using the folding method?"
I have not. Mostly because the stock pieces I get between budget towards the shop, because I don't have like a very fast revenue build for it. Most of my stuff is just going to be general shaping, and I don't want to use up all my stock to do folding methods. Also, I need chisels, but I'm still gathering a lot of my own tools, even at this stage.
And there we go. Oops, I flipped past it. Now I'm going to get back to it. Chuck Reardon asked, "How or where does the Damascus legend begin, and why can't anyone find out the true nature?"
If I'm dredging back my history, I believe it started in Damascus. That's why it was called Damascus, because it was famous for that specific type of metal. The legend around it is probably similar to,
like, the legend of Greek fire.
Legend of Catan kind of became mythos. I'm sure it was just crucible steel or pattern forge. Probably either of those, and it just got stylized and hyped up because it was a very good steel. So I mean, we could very well be making it, but no one's got no one's made a consensus of whether or not it's true. And there's people who swear by it. There's people who disavow it. There's people who say it's mythical, like adamantium or orialcum, because those are metals that we have not ever made or had.
But legends persist.
Of course, and that's the beautiful thing I find about any old art or archaic form of warfare. There's always something mythical, and I think that's something beautiful that people lose sight of, because in this day and age, no one has hopes, no one has heroes. Not true heroes in the sense of like something that is unattainable to the person awing at it.
And well, we have to ask a John Doe question. Has Stalvind ever dabbled into whitesmithing?
Just a tad.
I don't even know what that is. That sounded just controversial. A little bit racist.
Well, I mean, unless you're talking about goldsmithing, because jewelry making and silver and casting and such would fall under what we would probably call tinsmithing or silversmithing.
Gotcha.
It's a branch of jewelry making, if I'm not incorrect on that. But I believe that is where that falls. So whitesmithing would not be incorrect.
Well, now, I don't know what the reference is, so I'm going to go ahead and skip that one. Sam Stutler saying that Toledo steel has a similar reputation.
A lot of old Toledo steel was very good for its time, and like many things, over the course of its history and time, it eventually became mass-produced, and mass production requires speed. And to make masterpieces and truly good things takes time. Time which you cut corners, time which you get crap stock, and such as that. Nowadays, you get Toledo steel. It's like buying a wall hanger from that late-night TV show.
Oh, I love those late-night TV shows, but only when they cut themselves. I do. I can't help it. Because, like, this knife is really sharp. And then, yep, they cut themselves open and have to leave the stage because they're shooting a geyser from their hand.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I tell you what, let's go ahead and talk about a typical project. When you go to make, let's say, a 4 or 5 inch blade, what do you do from start to finish?
Well, first, whenever I make my typical blades, I stay within a typology because I'm trying to master one of them first, because those lessons will transfer to other types of blades and family trees of blades.
Mm-hmm.
Knife making is very varied. There's different styles of making them. So I start by, when I make my sacks, I start trying by making that iconic shape of the from the rake, or the rake to the tip, by hammering that down and getting rid of this little fish mouth, which I showed on last episode, where it starts to take this part of the bar and fold it down and try to get it to meet. Because eventually I can grind out where there will be a coal weld. If I do it right, there won't be, because I will pounded it down to where the shoulders are flush with each other and they won't coal weld. And then from there, I start to figure out where I want the bevels to be after I get everything started. And I start making my bevels, and then I start forming the tang. Sometimes I go out of order. I experiment with different orders to find out what's more efficient for me. Last episode, I started with the front, and then immediately started working on the bevels, I believe. I didn't start on the bevels, I'm sorry. I worked on the front, and then I went to the tang. Or was it the tang to the front? I get confused sometimes. Sorry.
It happens.
But essentially, I just pick a side to start with. Front, back. But once I get on, I start working and shaping about where I think the blade will be lengthwise, widthwise, and I start tapering where I want it tapered. Like each new knife is an experiment, trying to figure out what I like about it. What I want out of the knife, what its purpose is.
Sure.
And a lot of the times, I end up with what is called a sheepfoot knife. Most of mine have been sheepfoot knives, sadly. I've been stuck in that. I have not been able to get my perfect sacks yet. But I won't stop working on it until I do.
Well, that's the obsessive-compulsive nature of anybody who does anything in an artistic way. So that's one of the things we just have to cope with. I know, like Steven Spielberg always said, that he never finishes a film, he has to abandon it. Yeah. Because there's only so far you can go without driving yourself insane as an artist.
That's exactly true. But I'm going to let my obsession run its course and push me to want to perfect it.
Oh, sure.
Until the day I get to a point in my life where someone looks at one of the knives I make and goes, "This is a masterpiece," that'll be the day I become a master.
Yeah, I mean, you always have to have passion for whatever you're doing, because if not, you might as well just put a robot in the place.
Exactly.
And let me pull back here a little bit. I don't know about this, Occam, but I'll ask. Occam's router says, is quenching a blade with a human body, as supposedly some smiths did, beneficial somehow over an oil quench?
No,
That
there's
that
too many impurities in the blood.
I would say that sounds very made up.
It probably is hype. It sounds cool. It sounds menacing, but there's too much crap in the blood that would bond to the steel and help in its erosion more than its strengthening. It also wouldn't cool the blade at the right temperatures. Depending on the steel you're using, you either need a slow cool, a medium cool, or an instant cool. And I say instant, but I mean like a fast cooling. But no, the human blood does not function in such a capacity that would be beneficial.
Well, I'm sure there's probably somebody who did it along the way, just so he could make the sales pitch that this was forged in the blood of my enemies.
Probably. Probably.
Gulf City cartographer asks, is there any good literature or websites to harvest information for a total novice?
Yes. You could start with the Complete Blacksmith Guide. That is a good book. It'll teach you everything you basically need to know. It's a little dry. I'm not gonna lie to you. You can also find good resources on the shoot. Let me look up the name because when I butcher it, I do it every single time. The ABANA. That is the Artist Blacksmiths Association of North America. That one's all right. It's got plenty of good information and resources there. I wouldn't suggest joining it, mostly because it's mostly just for art, and it's basically just a really expensive magazine subscription. But those magazines are full of information and different projects.
Well, that is one of the good things about the internet. If it were around 10 years previously, we probably would have had a couple more keys to certain kingdoms of artisanship. But I guess we take what we get.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Alex Martin asks, what is the easiest type of blade? What is the easiest type of blade shape for a knife type blades to start on?
Well, first just find one that you like, and then study its typology, its geometry. Learn as much about the individual knife shape that you like, and then start to work towards making that each time.
Gotcha.
I find saxes, the brokeback sax, to be the easiest shape. It's quite simple, but it's, as I've found, very difficult. At the same time, it's rewarding because every time I make a knife, I get a step closer to that.
Well, and you have to find something that you have an affinity with. I mean, I don't think anybody would, say, make a rapier unless they were fascinated with how rapiers were made. Or, make a scimitar or a dirk. Basically, I would think personal taste is once again what drives the artisan to craft what they craft.
True. I mean, you do have to have a want.
And let's see here. Gulf City Cartographer asks, would you ever forge yourself a hammer or a tool to use?
Yes. Actually, a lot of blacksmiths will say that's the first project you should do, is build your own forge, or after building forges, to smith your own tools. There is benefits to this. It teaches you what kind of tools you want. You can craft them yourself. They're relatively easy projects. I did not start with that. I bought my tools because I didn't trust my craftsmanship in the very beginning to be good.
Okay, well, to follow up on that, What tool did you actually forge for yourself?
I'm currently about to forge here as soon as I get the materials a rounding hammer as well as a flatter.
A bladder?
Flatter, like
Oh.
flat, but with N-E-R. Haha.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say, you don't have to use the bellows anymore, so you don't need a bladder.
Exactly.
Um, Let me pull down here. John Doe asks, how does Stalvind deal with the cost of forging versus being able to sell a product at a reasonable price? I've got an answer for
Well,
that, but you go ahead.
well, that depends on what you consider a reasonable price. I value some of my knives to be at least $100 worth. Um, some about 80, depending on your price range. You might find me on a good day making about a $50 knife. But I do not count my skill into it yet because I don't feel like I've got enough to put in on the skill. But I do charge for my materials, my fuel, and my time, not so much the artistry into it. So I balance all that together.
Well,
It's about 15. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and my answer to it would be, would you rather have something rolling off an assembly line that was made without cause or care, or somebody who has actually had their hands on it, shaping it and making it specifically for someone?
Yeah, there is a certain amount of like ergonomics that would go into it. Like I've asked a few of my current special order clients to give me hand sizes so I can make the handles fit them snugly.
Oh,
Especially with like Weeaboo Jones's Zyphus blade, because when I make weapons, and I use that term loosely because everyone realizes that when I make people tools, aka knives, swords, and so on, I want it to fit their hand perfectly because it's made for them, not anyone else who would pick it up.
oh yeah. I bought a Spanish-made sword that had a griffin hilt on it, and I can't wield the thing because the hilt's curved down, so I can't actually have my hand wrapped around the actual pommel without one of the hilt edges digging into my hand. So it's perfectly useless.
I'm certain you could still use it. It just be how much tolerating of the pommel's edge digging into you that you would tolerate.
Oh, I've got an old British short sword, so. And because of my height, well, you've seen me. Because of my height, that's pretty much the perfect gauge if I was ever going to swing a sword.
Yeah, like with Jones, she's short. So I mean, a Zyphus blade is about anywhere from like a foot and a half to about 2 foot long, from tip to bottom. So I mean, that would fit her perfectly.
Mm. Yeah, and she's a petite little feller.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. The right sword in the right hand makes a lot of difference in a fight too, along with skill, obviously. But the right tool for the right job.
Well, and I have to disagree because John Doe put in, but you can spend too much time on a project seeking perfection that would push your costs well over what any reasonable person could pay. Not necessarily. If someone sees the artisanship of it, if someone sees the craftsmanship of it, if somebody can, basically find the beauty in what drove that obsession, then price honestly is no object.
The other half to that is if I had the open checkbook and had all the tools I'd ever need or want rather, I could turn a 30-hour project into a 15-hour project. I can turn a 10-hour project on a knife into maybe a 4-hour project. So if I made you, let's just spitball, an 8-inch Bowie knife, thick, traditional, brass, whole nine, but I have a fully stocked shop, I might charge you $100 per hour. At the same time, the quality would reflect inside the blade. And we would discuss what materials you'd want, what kind of want. And I would discuss these things with you so you would know how much you're going to probably spend.
Yeah, it's a lot of you. if you're not going with mass produced, then you've already got a frame of mind that you want something that somebody had their hands on and took loving care to craft, to sculpt. It's the same as, what you would pay for a Velvet Elvis, as you would pay for, a highly paid portrait by another artist. I think that's one of the things that's really getting lost nowadays, is the fact that people are so used to paying Walmart prices for things that they don't accept craftsmanship, or they're just ignorant to it, if that makes sense.
It does, and that's very much the current plague, is that people want manufacture versus quality. And I wrote an essay in college about that, was manufacturing versus handcrafted. People want it now, but they also want to pay little to nothing for outstanding quality. And unfortunately, craftsmen can't do that for you because they know the value of what they're making. You can't commission me 40 years down the road when I've achieved some form of mastery of my craft and expect me to make you an Ulfbert or a Masamune type sword with that level of detail and expertise for little to nothing. I'm just going to laugh at you until you go, well.
And I do have to say that Alex Martin and Gulf City Cartographer have been very active in the chat. If there are any questions that aren't answered and you haven't gone over yet and subbed to Stalvind's channel, you certainly should do that right now, because I've been around for, I think, like the past 4 shows. Yeah. I forget.
You've showed up. You've shown up quite a bit.
Oh yeah. Well, that's because it fascinates me. I think it's amazing what you do, and that somebody is essentially digging out and trying to keep another art form, because I think forging is an art form. Trying to keep that art form alive. And there's a couple of people who do it on the internet, but like one of the guys that I used to watch, he hasn't done anything for quite a while. And then there's the guy who was forging fantasy weapons, which just kind of made me yawn, just because of the fact that the fantasy weapons are basically too unreasonable to be able to be used. I mean, he did Cloud Sword, for God's sake. You're doing a 7-foot long sword that has a blade that's double the size of a broadsword or a two-handed sword. I like to see things that can be crafted that in certain circumstances, practical circumstances, can actually be used. If you guys, if we run out of time, which of course we always do, you can always go over to his channel. I've never seen you turn down a question. You've always been very interactive with your chat.
I try to be.
Well, you succeed, and that's definitely a good thing. I do like the quote: "The smith is worth more than the general."
Yeah.
Let's see.
You can have someone lead.
We've got another question from Gulf City Cartographer. What materials make good handles? And would you use different materials for smithing tools versus weapons?
Well, wood is always my go-to because it's easiest to find, and you can find good pieces that look nice as well as being practical. I see a lot of smiths go for more modern composite materials, which is fine. I mean, they work. Most people like that the feeling of like ergonomic rubber in their hands, and that's reasonable. I can't say no to that. But I will probably always stick to traditional methods because my focus is in historical pieces and remaining true to that.
Well,
I would use different wood depending on whether it's a tool or a weapon.
Well, I would say if I ever get you to make me a knife, I have a couple of slabs that I would like to be made for the handle. Stone slabs.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
it's dumortierite, and it's normally a blue stone, but the series that I picked up was mined in a place where they did the atomic testing, and so it doesn't have a Geiger counter on it, but it literally glows in UV like 3 or 4 different colors.
Nice.
So I think that would be badass on a knife.
It would be. I'm definitely gonna buy a Geiger counter now, just in case you send it to me.
Oh shit! Doc sent me something. Get out the Geiger counter.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. Let me scroll down here. Victor Rand. Will most smithies ever be able to smythe exotic metals like iridium, titanium, or memory metals or toxic alloys? Or exotic alloys, sorry.
You'll find some smiths do exotic alloys. I think there's a few smiths that do YouTube or some form of streaming that they test out a lot of metals. Now, I'm going to probably stick to mostly steels until I find an alloy I like, and I might make a one-off with it. But I'm pretty sure you'll find people who work those materials. I'm not sure whom, but I'm sure there's someone who does.
See, in my lightly browned brain, I was thinking that if I ever did anything with metals, I'd try to start out making prototypes either out of copper or brass, because they seem to be some of the more malleable ones to work with.
They are. So that's why we started with those materials as we progressed all the way through the Iron Age onto further on. But they do not make good tools in the long term of longevity with them. But you can make prototypes. An even easier method is wood or wax to make a prototype, so you can see what you got right there. You shape it yourself and use that for your designs.
Now, have you been sent a specific design that you'd have to mold out and wax before you went to it?
I have not yet. I imagine that's also because I'm relatively new to the scene on here, and no one's really commissioned me from here. I've had a few commissions outside of this, but that's because I knew them before.
Gotcha. Let's see here. Willie Cugley asks, what types of steel do you use depending on client building a knife?
I stick to the metals I know best, which right now will be 1084 and 1075. They make really good knives. That's what I usually try to stick with because it's a consistency thing. The last knife I was working on the last stream was a piece of 5160, which is spring steel.
If I remember correctly, you got a good polish on it before you even... you were just building the edge on it, but it seemed to shine up nice.
Oh yeah, once you remove the patina and you get a nice grind on it for a little bit, it takes a nice liking to light. But for the most part, it's just getting all the hammer marks out. I'm still inexperienced in the point of hammer control, so some of mine have what one of my clients called a character. I don't know why they wanted such an ugly knife, but they got it.
Well, yeah, I mean, you gotta fit to the will.
True. My best knife was named Nothing.
Any particular reason, or
I gave it to my father because his gag was whenever I asked him, Dad, what do you want for Father's Day? What do you want for Christmas? Blah blah. He'd always answer nothing. So I finally forged him Nothing and gave it to him. So if he ever got mad and stabbed someone, they go, "Did you give this man this knife?" I'm like, "I gave him nothing."
Now, let's go ahead and talk about the transition. What inspired or encouraged you to get onto the YouTubes?
Mostly, actually, you guys. The Killing Joke, and a couple other people kind of pushed me towards that. Even Sir Adamantite did. And I was like, All right. I already did a couple of videos for a streamer named Huts for one of his knives that I made, and some people liked it and some people enjoyed it, and I got a couple of messages saying, "Hey, that's great stuff. Keep it up." And I was like, you know what? This would be easier if I just stream it.
Yeah.
And since then, I've just been pushing out content.
Although I would also like to see, like a breakdown, like if you've got one, because I know you've got IRL to deal with, but I would love to see a video with speed capture, putting it together.
Oh yeah.
Take 20 hours worth of work and knock it down into 20 minutes.
Oh yeah, totally. That's why I got the editor now. That'll be his job.
Now, is there anybody that you would recommend on the YouTubes, following along kind of your same vein? Somebody that you watch or somebody that you enjoy who's in the same field.
I found there's a nice gentleman who's called Thor's Forge. He's a pretty good smith. He makes a lot of Scandinavian weaponry and items. That's one I like. There's also Parker Brown. He is Crescent Moon Armory. He's primarily known as an armorer. I actually want some of his armor, but I don't have the 15 grand to start it.
Oh, that's.
But yeah, that's for to commission him to make me a full plate suit.
Yeah, and I will say I will take no credit for what you're doing. I was just craving new content, and I love the stuff that you do. I think it's I think it's fascinating. I think it's worthy of people's times, because there's so much out there that, I mean, everything seems to be on YouTube to be drama based. That something has to be going wrong somewhere, and you have to feed the beast. And if you're going to feed it, give it a more meritorious meal. Somebody who's actually creating something. I find it incredibly difficult and almost criminal that there are a ton of people out there that are making inventive or insightful content that just get passed by because they don't have more than a 5 or 10 minute attention span.
Yeah, we've cultivated this very short, very I need right now. I've lost attention kind of culture and with our viewing. And I actually blame YouTube for that for the most part. But it is a medium that is strong, and if I can get people to be inspired to want to research or read or even get interested in the art itself, then awesome. It's less about me monetizing what I'm doing online versus educating or entertaining, because I'm sure there's other smiths who are groaning because I mispronounce something or don't call it by the right name. By the same token, I appreciate that I'm willing to do that out there and show what I'm doing to get other people interested.
Well, and I also like the fact that your audience is learning as you're learning. You've got the foundational knowledge, but if something crops up, it's not something that you're ready to bury. To say, oh, well, I didn't know this. It's like, oh yeah, hey, cool, check this out. This is what I discovered. You're willing to share all that, and I think that type of communication is incredibly valuable, especially on YouTube, where there are people who try to be incredibly protective about what they do and how they do it. Whereas you're like, hey, I love doing this. This is how I do it. And, if you've got any love for it, you can take this and expound on it. Even if you find out something that worked better for you, hopefully you'll share it. And that informational gap will lessen.
Yeah, that was actually one of the biggest things that I've enjoyed, is that you guys get to see as I do something and figure it out. You can also take what you saw and learn and apply it to the same thing if you're interested in it. But I also hope to inspire diligence, passion, and some form or another artistry in whatever you or whoever is watching in their vein of passions.
Yeah, and the people, and the people
Go
that
ahead.
I speak with, I always use the acronym Flex Your Pec, which is you have to have passion for what you do. You've got to make the effort to do it, and then you've got to be committed to see it all the way through. And in that way, even if in the long run there's failure at the end of it, there's no personal failure because you did the best that you could do. You were on your A game the whole time, and you had belief in what you were doing to see it all the way through and to make that effort. I think that clearly stands out when you're doing basically what I call educational videos.
Yeah, that's very true. I find it relaxing as well to kind of talk with the audience and show them what I'm doing. It kind of feels like I learned a little bit of this from Bob Ross, but you know, I enjoy letting them see my mistakes because it's something that can prevent someone else from doing it. But it's also the Sith mentality that I have. Follow that Sith code, take out the force elements of it, and it's just a self-help guide.
Yeah, I mean, because people really can't learn unless there's somebody out there available to teach them. And you are incredibly accessible. There's no bones about what you do, and that's a rare quality because most people, usually if they have a specific skill, a special trade, they'll be a little secretive, a little guarded about how they do what they do, and that can only end up in misery because you're not educating at that point. You're essentially just showing off. And
Oh, of course.
and I never get that feeling from you. It's always like, okay, here's what I'm doing now. And you'll stop and take the time and say, here, this is what the blade's looking like right now. I'm going to try to work it so we've got the handle to deal with, but let's go ahead and do some grinding on it. And,
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of content people should be watching.
I agree. There's a lot of times where I wish I could do more or stream longer just to not fill out time so much as like finish one knife on camera, which sadly that's mostly because I don't have the handle materials yet. I've been working on finding some cheap stuff. Not cheap in quality, but you know what I mean.
Oh man, I tell you what, if I can find it, I'll send you. I think we still have some of it. I'll send you some Ipe. Ipe is Brazilian cherry wood. It's like the hardest wood available. It's heavy.
Harder than the ironwood?
Huh?
Harder than like black walnut or ironwood?
Yes.
Outstanding. That will be interesting.
Literally, when we were chopping them down, we were making picnic benches. I had to change the chop saw blade every 6 to 8 pieces. And we were using the hardcore diamond, and it was just tearing those blades up. But it's rough and tough wood. It already looks like it's been stained. It's some beautiful stuff. Seriously, if I can find it, I'll figure out a way to mail a piece down so you can play with it.
Outstanding. I would love it. I've always told anyone on the stream that if you got interesting materials that you can't use or don't want to use, send it to me. I'll use it. I'll put it into a project. I'll even attribute your name to it as a donator of material.
Well, unless it's OSB, then tell them to fuck off.
Yeah, true. That's very true. But
that's a true briar knife. Because you get more splinters holding it than anything else. But yeah, I mean, I have a friend who dealt in exotic woods, and he used to like to make cigar boxes, especially out of like cedar, because apparently it holds the humidity better or something like that. But yeah, I'll talk to him, see if there's some fun stuff, because I love doing that shit. I love sending out stuff that people can potentially work with, that's not just sitting there waiting for somebody to die and then their relatives go through and just throw everything away.
Yeah.
That's what has a tendency to happen.
There was a carpenter in town that recently passed away, and his wife sold more or less his entire wood shop to another carpenter. And I actually had to throw out a lot of stuff today because he left me a dump trailer to clean out. And there was so much good wood that's been ruined because it was left out in the rain. I was like, oh, if this was just not soaked through and through and now splintering and falling apart, this would be good.
Ugh. Yeah.
Oh, it was painful.
That Ipe is not only water resistant, but sun resistant too. It takes a long time for it to actually fade.
I might have to start looking into getting a settable stock of that, if possible. It'd probably be expensive, though.
It's not inexpensive, but since we had some left over, I know he's got some up there, so I'll make him come up off it.
I'm willing to pay for it.
Yeah. You know, money in my realm doesn't really have a lot of play. You know what I'm saying? As long as somebody can do something good with it, then that ends up to be my payment. You see, I don't push my Streamlabs, so I don't care.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just hoping that people get entertained, and I think there's still a ton of interesting people. And I had somebody ask the question, well, why would you have him on? He doesn't even have triple digit numbers. And I'm like, who are you talking to? I am not that person. I want to interview interesting people who do interesting things. And you sure as hell do something very interesting. You're helping to keep a lost art from going completely MIA. And I certainly appreciate that. And any type of spotlight I can throw on it, then it's definitely worth it. And I'm not trying to butter your roll or anything, but I mean, it's true. There are people out there who do some very fringe things, and nowadays blacksmithing is very fringe, but that doesn't mean it's not worthwhile, and it shouldn't have people looking in on you, people subbing to you. I think it's amazing. You're a very personable guy too, so it never feels like you're making the audience stand off.
Well, thank you. That was a lot of kind words. I don't know really how to truly respond to that of any meaning.
Just suffer and take it.
I will. I mean, I will take it. But, yeah, I mean, I love to have more people watching it. Oh, absolutely. I'd love to have more people get interested in wanting to see it. It's not so much necessary for me to have PewDiePie levels of numbers. I mean, those numbers mean nothing if I only have people who sub and just kind of like watch a second and like, eh. Yeah, I want people who enjoy it, who want to learn or see something or find it fascinating. Because, I mean, that's what I'm making it for. I'm making knives for me or someone else, but you get to take something away with it, too. Not to rebeat the horse, but I like to think of it as like the metal Bob Ross. I don't do a very soft voice, and we make happy little accents. I will swear, I will smoke, I will drink beer. I'm like a very vulgar Bob Ross. But if you take something away from it, then awesome. I mean, and with you, I find money to be just this false equivalency of success. It's something that facilitates an exchange. It feels like I'm ripping people off in a sense because it's paper that I'm bartering with them for something of tangible substance.
Yeah, and I get to talk to people who actually have stories, that have life lessons. And you know what? There may be 20 people listening, and one or two of them get it, or they clue in on it. Yeah. And that's a success rate I can deal with.
Oh, yeah, of course.
You know, if there's somebody out there like who's looking to get into doing blacksmithing or finds metallurgy appealing to them, then perhaps you can be that gateway. I mean, think of how many people tried to join the space program when Star Trek aired.
That's true.
There's a lot of engineers out there, a lot of people who work with NASA. Their big goal is to go meet an actor who was on a sci-fi series that only lasted 3 years and say, hey, you were the motivation for me to get from A to B. You know, and I'm the closest I can be to Star Trek at this point with my job skills. I don't see why that can't work out for anybody on YouTube who is doing a specialized content, who's doing specialized content creation.
I mean, I agree with that. That's a very good way of putting it, and that's why I appreciate when watching some of the past Doctor and calls. You're probably one of the best interviewers I've seen in a long time of being an American binging TV because it was a good babysitter and watching old news where they would do interviews and do them like well. I've not seen this level of quality in your previous episodes since then.
Well, I appreciate that. I just want to have a discussion, and if I do get somebody who's has in the millions of hits, or somebody IRL who's made a shit ton of movies or been on TV series or whatever. The only thing I want to do is just thaw the ice between perceived you're up here on this pedestal as to, yeah, I'm a normal person and this is the job that I do that makes you like me. I think there's amazing interviews. There's more to come, I'm sure of it, but it's only if we get quality people like yourself.
Well, I appreciate that. And I hope to facilitate your further growth with more people wanting to come out or to be interviewed. And you continue to get more and more quality people, and eventually you're the one they seek. You're the one that they come and beg, like, Doc, please let me be on your on-call. Well, you will get your Stephen King, sir. You will get your Stephen King.
Well, they said, she said no, but her Stephen King's assistant said no, but I'm like, okay, well, you mind if I try back in there? And she's like, well, you can always try back. I can't say no. And I was like, well, you can say no, because that would stop me from bugging the shit out of you. But even with John Carpenter, still haven't given up on that. We have a couple of B-list celebrities that are in the pipeline right now, just trying to figure out. There's one of them right now who's essentially touring, doing the press junkets for a movie. Wasn't the main character in the film, but it's like, yeah, when everything settles down, we can talk. I'm going to have the Kyoto brothers on, who are the guys who did Killer Clowns from Outer Space. And they're like model makers, pretty much. And that's one of the things I definitely want to get into because that's how they made it in, because they started doing with Critters, the old 80s movie Critters.
Oh, yeah.
So they're going to be doing, they've got a contract for Disney where they're creating a brand new ride for them. And I just have to wait until March when they're finally done with that contract, and then I can pull them in. So, yeah, I guess my passion, effort, and commitment are kind of paying off somewhat. Although everybody said I will never get better than getting the number 7 porn star of all time. But, that doesn't matter to me. It was a great conversation, though.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Turish comes in with a city south of me has a blacksmithing guild that seems to go through a lot of coal. How much coal do you go through in a month? Don't you use propane?
I do have a coke forge / coal forge.
Oh.
I have not clayed it yet. It's terribly bothersome at the moment to get that prepared. It would be much easier to use because I have an abundance of coke. But you will go through quite a bit. But if you have a guild that is working together, and constantly burning, and a lot of people burning from the same stockpile, you of course will go through a lot of coal and coke. But I haven't really fired it up, but I have used a coke forge. You can go through probably about 4 or 5 pounds in a day if you're doing a long burn. Well, and that's a lot of coal.
Well, honestly, isn't it more evolution than anything else that you do the method that you currently do?
To a degree, there's benefits to being a propane user versus coal or coke. It is, in a sense, cleaner. It has a consistent temperature at all times. It can be tuned. but it does not reach the temperatures that I can get with coke and coal.
So let me ask, if you were getting your setup to do what you wanted to do, what are the dollar figures that are blocking your way?
What are figures that are blocking my way?
Yeah, like how much money do you think you would be comfortable with spending, because you've got IRL, you got bills to pay.
Yeah.
How much would you think that you would need to be able to have a forge setup that you'd be comfortable with?
Oh man, there's a lot that goes through my mind right there. I definitely need a bigger shop to facilitate that, which we should be getting here soonish. But that's a hard one, sir. Because I mean, that's a variety of things like comfortability versus desire for different things. But the basics, what I would see, I would probably need maybe $25,000 to get everything.
That doesn't seem unreasonable. I do know we ran into a guy who was making his own knives down in Knoxville,
Mm-hmm.
and it was selling them next to a gem shop, which that's the only reason why I was around there, because rocks. But yeah, most of his started off at like 200, 250, and they were beautiful knives. I mean, I don't see why people have the disconnect between, okay, I found it at Walmart and it's costing me $19.99, and then, okay, this blade was like made by human hands, forged 20 to 40 hours, and it's going to cost me $100. Gee, let's think for just 2 seconds which is going to last you longer.
Well, there's also this other factor, Doc, that most people don't factor in, is that when you buy something from me, say 10 years down the road, I will say would be a reasonable time for me to start charging more than what I do. You buy a $150 knife from me. You've just spent and invested $150 into a handcrafted piece. You're going to want to take care of it. You're going to want to baby it. You're going to want to pass it down because you made that big investment. Are you going to really pass down that $10 knife you bought at a gas station? No. It's going to fall apart in 6 months, and you're going to forget about it, or you're going to lose it, or number of minor inconveniences. But you're never going to let that $150 investment out of your immediate control.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to go on a mantle, or it's going to go into a safe, or it's going to go into a lockbox of some kind, or forever within your person or on your person, because you made an investment and you mentally treat it as though it were worth much more than what I sold it to you as.
And I think that follows along with what psychologists call materialistic detachment.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you can have something, and if you lose it, you've already been conditioned to say, "Oh well, I'll just stop by Target and buy another one."
Exactly.
And I think that really pinpoints with a laser sight how historic things are. I mean, my grandfather passed me down a pocket knife that he had when he was a kid, and rusty old battered piece of shit. But the fact that it survived from he basically got it as a payoff from rolling hay bales when he was like 10 or 11 for a week, and the guy gave him a pocket knife because it was during the Depression. And he kept that thing, and he kept up with it. I've got it set away. I don't use it. I won't touch it. But I did spend one day with him where he taught me how to sharpen knives. And that was my reward for listening and watching how to sharpen a knife in the correct way. And I think that type of history, that type of tradition, that needs to be passed down. It has to be. It's a part of our genetic makeup as people who came over to a continent and had to survive.
Oh, of course.
It's not just it's not just a passing fancy. It's not one of those impulse purchases. And I don't think if you make quality items that anybody should ever do it on an impulse. It should be, yes, I've got a feeling for this. Not to get too hippie, but I've got a feeling for this. This seems right to me. This is what I should have. And you're completely 100% correct. If you're paying more for something, then that detachment doesn't happen. It becomes an heirloom at that point.
Oh, yeah. Let's see, what was it? Yeah, I bought a training sword, and I love that thing. It's a beaten to hell. But that is something I plan to take care of. Even if it starts to fade, I'm going to repair it. I'm going to keep up with it, and maybe I'll give it to my first grandchild or child that wants to train with it.
Yeah, because I think it comes to the point where if you don't find value in it, why should you have it in the first place?
Well, of course. I mean, if it means nothing to you, then why have it at all?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say real quick. Both my father and my mother died last year, and my siblings have been going like, "Oh, well, come over and get stuff," and I was like, "I don't really want anything. I don't find anything that has any intrinsic or historic value to me."
No.
If you need it to, pay off any bills that are left over, then go ahead and do that. There was only one caveat I made, and it was a couple of things that just made me smile when I thought about them. And they had no intrinsic value whatsoever, but they were crafted items. And, something you probably would see in the back of a garage sale with a dollar tag on it, but it meant something to me. And hopefully if it ever gets passed to anyone else, it'd be like, well, here's the significant value of it. And I think something like a blade definitely has a significant value. Because it kept a shitload of people alive back in the day.
Yeah. And that's the beautiful thing about heirloom objects. Even if I ventured into the weird world of jewelry making, I mean, if I make something, I want it to last. I don't want to make something that you'll discard after 2 or 3 uses and then move on to the next new shiny. I want something that you cherish, something that you will build memories on. I hope that anyone I make a knife for never has to use it to defend themselves, but I want them to, if they had to, they know assuredly that it will do its job.
That it won't fail.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry, I got a quick question here. Cartographer, we're probably going to do an IRS tonight. Be honest with you, most of the time we take off the late Sunday to Monday morning and then Monday morning to Tuesday morning, so I can prep for Doctor on call. That's usually how it rolls. But then again, it's up to Kadunk because it's mostly her show too. Now, the one thing, since we're kind of winding up here, I wanted to make sure anybody out there who's in the audience, who's thinking about your craft, thinking about your trade, what words of wisdom. Now, of course, we're coming from the point to where you are, not, sword master expertise, but you're at that specific place where you've got the passion, you've got the effort, and you've got the commitment to do it. What words of wisdom would you like to share with them?
When you start down this road, you're going to hit a lot of bumps. And the thing about it is, as long as you got that fire in your heart, you will never stop. It's not an addiction. It's, not to be too cheesy and cliche, but it feels like a destiny almost. Once you start down that road and you feel the fire burn in your chest and you're standing in front of your forge, you feel the heat hit you and it fills you with an energy, and you start pounding and you find this rhythm in you that just comes to you. You'll learn a lot of different things. And you'll learn a lot about yourself, how much you can stand with it, how strong your grip can be, how forceful you can, swing your hammer, but you'll also learn how to hold back on that. You'll learn where the hammer strikes need to be softer. You'll learn how to do all these things, but it comes with time. And no matter how much you screw up, just take your broken piece, throw it into a pond. You'll feel really good after hurling it because it's like an exertion thing. Go back. Yeah, oh yeah, there's several that litter at least 2 or 3 ponds where I just like, you failed me. Yeah. And get yourself another piece. Think, clear your mind, and just think on it. Think about what you're crafting. Remember, you're stronger than the metal that you're shaping. It bends to your will, not you to it.
Sounds very cathartic.
It is. And I've had someone tell me that that's a horrible thing. It shouldn't feel cathartic. I'm like, no, it does. When I'm feeling mad, I forge. When I'm feeling sad, I forge. When I'm feeling depressed, I forge.
Now, there's too many people who push away the value of primal urges.
Yes, people think negative emotions should be ignored. No, you bottle that shit up and you will become an unbalanced person. If you don't have dark thoughts, then you are denying yourself a part of yourself that rationalizes things. Yes, I have violent impulses. I know this, but I put them in outlets that benefit from that, such as my smithing. If I'm mad, I'll hammer. I'll pick a project I know needs more force, or I'll go out and train with my sword and practice on strikes until I feel at ease.
Yeah, because you got to let it go some way.
Yeah, if you bottle it up, you'll end up crazy like Ted Bundy or something. I only say Ted Bundy because they have that thing going on right now.
Well, I am hoping that that those who are watching who have not subbed to you have already done that. But if you haven't, the link is down in the descriptors, ladies and gentlemen. You can also follow him on Twitter as well. And, of course, my stuff's down there. The prescription for additional entertainment is there as well. Well, I guess it's that time to where I have to give my educated opinion. And I don't believe the diagnosis of anachronism is valid. I think we have a guest here who has the ability to be creative, to be artistic, and to be able to share a skill that is slowly but surely waning away, which does not deserve to be sunset the way it is. And with that, I would like to thank you very much, Stalvind's Forge, for stopping by.
Thank you kindly, Doctor. It's been a pleasure.
And let's go ahead and just give a little wrap up here. If you're wondering what's coming up, then great, because we've got a terrific lineup. Next week we'll be talking with Steve Taylor, and Steve Taylor is a voice you will probably recognize if you're ever in any major media market. He does voiceovers, but not the voiceovers that you think. He's also a full-fledged meteorologist. And that's going to be some interesting takes that he'll have, because we'll talk about the weather, but we'll do it in an entertaining way. Then, of course, on the 19th, we've got C.K. Walker coming in. She is a horror author. Got her start with creepypastas. And she ended up now being part of the very much lauded and nominated The Haunting of Hill House, which is showing on Netflix right now. She was one of the major writers for that. And then wrapping up the month, we'll be having on Optic Decay. That's right, Optic Decay, the morning artist himself. And we'll be talking about stuff and things. And then, of course, not to give away what's coming up in March, but do expect an interview from MMA fighter Tara LaRosa. And that's all I'm going to say on that. So, for all of us here, for Dr. On Call, I'd like to thank you for coming out, and thank you for sharing your incredibly valuable time with us. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is with a deep sadness, but with a little gladness, knowing we'll be back again next week, that the doctor's office is now closed. Good night.